right, so yeah, today we're going to be talking about fathers. Dun, dun, dun. I called my dad a couple weeks ago and I said, are you preaching on Father's Day? And he said, oh, I was going to. And then he goes, well, why don't you do it? And I said, because I want to do it. And we said it at the same time. And I don't know, just lately I've been really feeling like I felt the need to talk about fathers. And I think it's great when you have your senior pastors up here and you have the men talking to the men, but sometimes I think it's needed that a woman talks to the men and vice versa. I think sometimes women need to hear from men and men need to hear from women. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you guys. There's going to be a lot of verses today, but don't worry, you don't have to look them up. All right, it's just a lot of references. So I kind of just want to start by saying Happy Father's Day to all of you dads out there, and that goes for fathers that are not biological fathers as well. You do not have to be a biological father to be a good father. So Happy Father's Day. Just before we really get into all of it, I want to give you guys some fun facts about fathers and the impact that fathers have. These are statistics pulled from multiple different studies, and if you guys want the studies later, I can give you guys the references to that. But let's just go through. Here's just 10 fun facts about what having a dad does for you as a child. So fathers and infants can be equally as attached as a mother and infants. When both parents are involved with the child, infants are attached to both parents from the beginning of life. Infants actually recognize the voice of their father in the womb. And so when they come out, they know who their dad is. Father involvement is related to positive child health outcomes in infants, such as improved weight gain and preterm infants' improved breastfeeding rates when they are closer to their father. Father involvement using authoritative parenting, which means loving with clear boundaries, leads to better emotional, academic, social, and behavioral outcomes for children. Children who feel closeness to their father are twice as likely as those who do not to enter college or find stable employment after high school. 75% less likely to have teen birth, 80% less likely to spend time in jail, and half as less likely to experience multiple depression symptoms. Fathers occupy a critical role in child development. Father absence hinders development from early infancy through childhood and into adulthood. The psychological harm of father absence experienced during childhood persists throughout the course of their life. The quality of the father-child relationship matters more than the specific amount of hours spent together. Non-resident fathers can have positive effects on children's social and emotional well-being, as well as academic achievement and behavioral adjustments. You do not have to be in the home to have an impact. And I know in today's world that's a normal thing. Divorce is really high in today's world. Hookup culture was really big in today's world. There's a lot of fathers out there who don't live with their kids, but you can still have an impact on your children. High levels of father involvement are correlated with higher levels of sociability, confidence, and self-control in children. Children with involved fathers are less likely to act out in school or engage in risky behavior in adolescence. Children with actively involved fathers are 43% more likely to earn A's in school and 33% less likely to repeat a grade. Father engagement reduces the frequency of behavioral problems in boys, while also decreasing delinquency and economic disadvantages in low-income families. Father engagement reduces psychological problems and rates of depression in young women. And overall, the impact that fathers and father figures can make is substantial. Just as there are many positive aspects to father involvement, the effects of father absence can be determined as well. I say that, I've said this for a while now, that compassion comes from the mother. Compassion is something you learn from the mother, but self-worth is something you learn from your father, especially in young women. And we're going to talk today about how to be a good dad and be a good father in the lives of your children and in the lives of people that you might not be an actual father to. I know my father was a father to many that he did not actually create. And so what better way to talk about how to be a good dad than to talk about my dad? Because let me just tell you guys, my dad is, and I know I'm biased in this, but my dad is the best dad. And not just in the sense of like I say it, but in the sense of I have had friends who grew up without fathers who have told me multiple times, I wish your dad was my dad. And I'll tell them, well, take him. Like, he could be your dad too. I'll share him. I'll share my dad. I do all the time. My aunt had 3 children, and her husband left when her youngest was 2. And growing up, they lived right next door, and my dad was their dad. And you can talk to those kids, especially the young man, and ask him who taught him how to be who he is, who taught him what was right is wrong, who taught him the morals, and he'll say, my Uncle Lloyd did. And so we're going to talk about the things that my dad is and how they correlate to our father. So the first thing that a good dad is he is dependable. In Luke 15 it says, and he arose and came to his father, but when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, bring out the best robe and put him in it, and put a ring on his hand and sandals and feet, and bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us be merry. For this is my son was dead, and he is alive again. He was lost and is found. This is the story of the prodigal son. If you want to see what a good, dependable dad is, read the prodigal son. Because this son goes out and he's like, I'm going to take all my money that you gave me and I'm going to go out and I'm going to do this. And he goes and he does all this stuff and he does all these sinful things and he wastes his money and all this stuff, and then he's at the bottom of his life and he's just in the depths of despair, and he comes home and he says, I'm not worthy to be called your son. But the dad meets him, runs to him and kisses him and embraces him. And this is a good indication of what a dependable father is, because the son knew the dad was there. My father is always there. My whole life. I've never had to worry or doubt or question whether or not my dad was going to be there. Even when I wasn't physically with my dad. I lived in Kansas for about 4 years, and I'm 18 hours away. My dad was there. Always, 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 always. And knowing that your father is dependable, knowing that your father is there when you need him, whether he's not physically there, but a phone call away or whatever, that builds you up as a child and as a human being to have that security that you need. Fathers are dependable. Deuteronomy 31:6 says, be strong and of good courage. Do not fear, do not be afraid, for the Lord your God is with you, and he goes with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you. Just like my dad is always there, the Lord is always there. And he's not going to leave. My dad will not leave me ever. Even when he leaves, he will not leave me. He is always there. I've never had to question that. My dad has always, 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 always been there. And I think we take for granted when we have good dads like that not everybody does. And the feeling of comfort and security that you get from your father being present is something that you cannot replicate. It's not something that can be put onto you by somebody else. It's not something that you can get from somebody else. The second thing that a father is a father is faithful. 1 Thessalonians says, pray without ceasing. A father is faithful to his Father in heaven. A father is faithful to his word. A father is faithful to the Lord. My dad is faithful. My dad is that same person on Saturday morning that he is on Sunday morning. He is faithful with every step he has ever taken in his life. He says what he means and he does what he says and all of it. And he's never been somebody that I've had to question his character or his integrity, because if he says it, he is telling you the truth because he is faithful. And he does not do that because of us. He does that because he loves the Lord and he is faithful to what God has asked him to do. Every situation where God has asked my father to do something, he has done it without question. And that is such a good representation and such a good example as us as children being grown up and being raised to watch my dad be faithful to God. Because when you're faithful to God, you don't get swayed. And you don't go with the wind. And that's stability that you have. Fathers are compassionate. A good father is compassionate. Like I said, there's a lot of verses. In 3 John, it says, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. In Psalms, it says, as a father shows compassion to his children, so the Lord shows compassion to those who fear him. And in Matthew, it says, if his son asks for bread, will you give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will you give him a serpent? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? Compassionate, loving. They're loving. They have compassion on their children. They show compassion with the things that they give. My dad is an acts of service person. And growing up, I'm a physical touch and a quality time. And there were times in my life that I was like, my dad doesn't really hug me a lot. He's not a very physical touch person. But growing up, I realized that his compassion and his love was shown through the things that he does. He still does this. To where, just a couple weeks ago, I had my trailer, and I dropped off my trailer at his house because I can't drive it up my road because it's a little iffy and I'm scared. And I wake up in the morning and my dad's dropping off my trailer, and he took it and he dumped it out the tank. He brought it up, he unhooked it, he did all those things. He didn't have to do any of that. I could have done all of it. He could have woken me up and made me go do it, but he's showing me his love and his compassion for me by his acts of service. He fills up my tires, he changes my oil, he helps me fix things. And he might not be the one that embraces me and hugs me and cuddles with me. That's my mama. But my dad shows me his love and his compassion through the things that he does for me every single day. He goes up to Montana and helps my brother finish his house. And let me just be real honest. My dad is in pain every single day. It takes all of his strength to get out of bed, to put his boots on, and to walk through life. And he still does all of these things for us because that's how much he loves us, and that's the compassion that he shows us every single day by getting up and helping us live life to the best of our ability. A good father disciplines. They do. Let me think it's on the back. Yeah. In Proverbs, it says, whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. In Ephesians, it says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. And in Hebrews, it says, for it is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons, for what son is there from whom his father does not discipline? For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Good fathers redirect. And that's the word I like to use, especially when we're talking about our Father in heaven, because I don't like the word discipline. I don't like the word, I don't like condemn. I don't like any of those, but they redirect. And my dad has done this many times. He's got big, strong hands, and he used them to discipline us and to redirect us and to teach us what was right from wrong. And there's the reason that all three of his children are good citizens in this world now, is because he disciplined us. He told us that that was not right, that this was right. He gave us a compass of what to use to walk through life in. You can be compassionate and be strict at the same time. I remember my dad used to tell me every time we would get spankings, this hurts me more than it hurts you. And I was like, no, it doesn't. What are you talking about? And he always used to, we would get in trouble and he'd send us to our room and he'd be like, I need you to go wait. And I thought it was torture because I'm sitting there waiting to get spanked. And I'm like, this is just awful, this is rude. But now as an adult, I understand that he needed to calm down, that he needed to get his bearings, so that when he did discipline us, it was out of love and compassion and faithfulness to us, not out of anger. He still does this. He's still redirecting us. He's still teaching us how to walk through life in the right way. A good father disciplines. Our Heavenly Father disciplines. And these disciplines are not to keep us bound and to keep us tied up and to give us rules and regulations. They're to protect us. And a good father protects you within his discipline. A good father is a man of his word. This is a big one for me. In Romans it says, "You then who teach others, do you not teach yourself? While you preach against stealing, do you steal? You who say that one must not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? For you who abhor idols, do you rob temples? You who boast in the law dishonor God by breaking the law. For it is written, the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you." In Matthew it says, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no." I say this probably 4 or 5 times a week. And it's a good indication of if that person has good character, is that their yes is yes and their no is no's. And let me tell you something, my dad is a man of his word. He does not lie. He does not boast. He does not finagle the truth. Is that the word? What is the word? Finagle. Thank you. The truth. He says what he says and he means what he says and he does it. He is a man of his word because God requires him to be. I'm going to tell you guys right now, fully honest, if you guys ever question whether or not my dad means what he says, he does. And this is from somebody who spent 30 years with him, watching every step, watching every move. If my dad says he's going to discipline me, he's going to discipline me. The rules were the rules. If he says he's going to take me out for a ride on a horse, he's going to take me out for a ride on a horse. If he says he's going to check up to see if I'm at the movie theaters where I said I was going to be, he's going to check up to see if I'm at the movie theaters where I said I was going to be. And there have been times in mine and my sister's lives that this has saved us. There have been times in our lives where we were rebelling and we were going out and we were pushing against our parents. And my sister will tell you there were times where she was just praying that my dad would show up because he said he would, and he did, and it saved her life. Because his yes is yes and his no is no. There is no black, there is no gray. It is black and white. And not having to question whether or not your father means what he says, the security that you have in that. Even as a grown woman, the security that I have that my dad is honest, which means I can trust him fully with everything that he tells me. I don't have to doubt. It's great. A good father is involved. He's involved with his kids' lives. In Luke it says, "The very hairs on your head are all numbered. Do not fear, therefore, you are more valuable than many sparrows." God knows the hairs on our head because he knows us deeply and intrinsically. In Jeremiah it says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you prophets of nations." God knows us so incredibly intimately, and a father knows his children. My dad knows that if he calls me and he says, "I'm making dinner, do you want to have salad or do you want to have steak?" What am I going to say? Steak. Every time. He knows that I don't like cotton, and that freaks me out. He knows that my sister doesn't eat elk. He knows how to ask my brother to do things, whereas not to make him angry because he is involved. He knows that I was a pitcher. He was at my games. He was at my sister's cheerleading competitions. He was at my brother's football games. He knows my fears and my doubts and my insecurities because he was there and he was involved in my life. He got to know me. Be involved. And these last two we're gonna sit on for a minute. A good father values the mother. In Ephesians it says, "Husband, love your wives. You must love them as Christ loved the church, for he gave his life for it." Christ did this so he could set the church apart for himself. We quote this all the time, right? Love your wives as Christ loved the church. This means to die for them. And let me be clear, you do not have to be married to value the mother. You can value the mother of your children because she's the mother of your children. The next one says, a good father is a teacher or leader. In Proverbs it says, bring up a child by teaching him the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not turn away from it. In Deuteronomy it says, keep these words in your heart that I am telling you today. Do your best to teach them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house and when you walk on the road and when you lie down and when you get up. In Proverbs it says, O sons, hear the teaching of a father. Listen so you may get understanding. A couple years ago, I was at a rodeo and there was a new father there. He was going to have a little girl. His wife was still pregnant. And he said, we were sitting down and we were talking, and he said, if I want my daughter to be like you, what do I have to do? And I said, there were two things that my father did that separated him from the rest. The first one was that he loved my mom. He respected and honored my mom. Fathers are the first example that children have of what a man is. They are their first representation to boys of how to be, and they are first example to girls of what a man should be. Especially for young girls, that's the first image we get of how men should act, of how men should behave, of how men should treat everyone. It's the first picture we have of a man, is our dad. And my father respected and valued my mom. They didn't always get along, and especially being an adult now, I see more of the struggles that people in marriage go through. And there were times that they didn't always like each other. But there's never been a moment in my life where my father has disrespected my mother. He's never dishonored my mother. And even when he didn't like her, he respected and honored her for being the mother of his children. And that taught me that that is how a man should be. Just as Christ loved the church and gave his life for the church, and our Heavenly Father does that for us every single day. My dad did that with my mom. And my brother-in-law said one time to me and my sister that my dad set all the men up for failure because there was no way that any man could live up to the way that my dad was, and that we have unrealistic expectations of how a man should be. And I said, that's not unrealistic because I see one every day. It's realistic, it's achievable, it's right there. And my standards will be that, always. Because he showed me this is how a man should be. He showed my brother, this is how you treat women. This is how you act. This is who you are. He valued and respected my mom, and that gave me the self-worth to demand value and respect from the people in my life. Like I said, compassion comes from the mom, but self-worth comes from the dad. The second best thing I told this guy is I said, he talked to Jesus. My father loved my mother and valued and respected my mom, and he talked to Jesus. And in doing so, because a good father is a leader and a teacher, he taught me to talk to Jesus. Nothing is more important than those two, in my opinion, of what a good father, a good man is. They respect the mother, and they talk to Jesus. There have been times in my life where the ability to talk to Jesus has saved my life. Because there are times in my life my father has not been there. Right? I lived in Kansas for 4 years. I was 18, 20 hours away. And there were times that even in that, I called my dad, and he drove all night. There was one time I broke down right outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico, coming home. It was 10 hours? I called him, and I was like, my car's dead. I'm on the side of the road. I can't get anywhere. And he hooked up his trailer, and he drove straight through and picked us up. That's the dependability that my dad has. But even when I wasn't there, because he taught me how to talk to Jesus, he taught me how to save my own life. And I told this man who was standing there asking me, how do I get a girl like you? And I said, respect her mother and teach her to talk to Jesus. Because those are the two things that will set her up for the rest of her life. The two things that will save her for the rest of her life. And let me tell you guys, just as a woman, if a man talks to Jesus, he's so much more attractive. Just for the young ones in here. You talk to Jesus, you pray to Jesus, you teach your kids to talk to Jesus. That's a man worth loving and honoring as a woman's standpoint. A good father leads and teaches his kids about Jesus because it literally saves their life. When I think about it, I get teary. And my dad's not an extroverted person, but he didn't have to be. Growing up, he would read the Bible to us when we were going to bed, and it would put me to sleep. He can't tell you every verse out of every chapter of everything. He can tell you, oh, it says somewhere in Old Testament, it says somewhere in New Testament. He doesn't know it off the top of his head by heart. It's not his personality. It's not the way his brain works. But I didn't have to know what the scripture said because I saw them being walked out every single day. The character of the man taught me who God was. And in today's world where 70% of women under the age of 40, of moms under the age of 40, 70% are single mothers. That means that there's 70% of households out there where the dad is not in the home with the kid. And that's a normal thing in my world, in my culture, is for parents to not be together. I was the abnormal one in school. When people found out that my parents were still together, they're like, what? Really? The youth group that I had with 30 kids, there was one family that was still together. They're sitting right back there. Out of 30 kids, there was one kid who had both parents in the house. And you saw the product of these children and the struggles that they went through. And I remember talking to one of those kids, and he's saying, I can't relate. I don't do any things that these kids do. And in my mind, I'm like, it's because your dad's at home. Because how important a father is. They say that a child needs their mother from infancy to 5. After the age of 5, a child needs their father. And I don't want to take for granted that I had my dad and I have my dad. My parents are celebrating 35 years of marriage this month. But it breaks my heart for the ones that don't. And let me just tell you guys, it is your responsibility as men to be the father to the fatherless. To take care of the widows, to take care of the single moms. Christ tells us to do that in the church over and over and over again. You don't have to biologically have a child to be a dad. And as the church, it's our responsibility to take in the widows and take in the orphans. And us girls can do that as much as we want, but until the men do it, nothing sticks. And it breaks my heart because in today's world, you guys are getting beat up. I don't know if you guys know, but there's this whole movement going on of feminists saying, I don't need a man. And that's just total crap. But seriously, what would we do without men? This world wouldn't exist. We wouldn't have the things that we have without you guys. You guys are phenomenal. You guys are amazing. You guys are created by God to do what you do. And I don't know if you've heard it lately, but as a woman, thank you for being men, for being good men, for following the Lord, for being here today. Thank you. And whether your children thank you or not, I will thank you for them, whether they admit it or not. And I'm not saying you guys are perfect. My dad was not perfect. But he was perfect in the sense that he made mistakes and he admitted it. He said, this was a mistake and I'm going to fix this. He redirected us and redirected himself in the process. We need you guys. The church needs you guys. The world needs good men. And they're so few and far between. As a single woman, I can tell you, it's hard. It's hard to find respectable men. It's hard to find men who are chasing after the father heart of God. It's so difficult. We get so frustrated. But of course, you guys are sitting back and the men in the world are being silent because everything in the world right now is telling you guys that you guys aren't needed, that you guys suck, that you guys aren't good enough, that we hate you. And that's just not true. Whether girls want to admit it or not, we need you. And I'm a very strong, independent, stubborn female, and I will tell you right now, I can't live without men. I would not survive. We would not survive, not even just in a biological sense of the world would cease to exist and procreate, but all of the things that you guys do on a daily basis that nobody sees, that nobody recognizes, that nobody understands. It's needed so desperately. And the weight that is put on specifically men of God is so heavy. I am so thankful that I am not a man. I don't want to do it. The cross that you guys have to bear to just take care of your families alone, but then go above and beyond. Like I said earlier, my dad is in pain 24/7. So much so that sometimes he can't button his shirt or lift his fork or shave. And every day he gets up and he puts his boots on and he comes and he serves. He comes and he serves his family and he comes and he serves you guys. He's taking every ounce of his strength every single day. And there are some days that I can physically see it on him. But he does it because that's what God required him to do. And a good man follows God. I am so unbelievably thankful for my father. But I'm also so unbelievably thankful for my other father. Because if it wasn't for my father in heaven, my father on this world could not do what he does. And it's the strength and the faithfulness that he has to God that has got him through. I understand that I'm the anomaly and that I have an amazing dad who loves the Lord. But if you guys don't, you do. Not only do you guys have an amazing pastor here for you, but if you guys didn't grow up with the amazing dad that I had, whether you're 7 or you're 70, you have an amazing father, because every single thing that I pulled out is just scripture. I'm not telling you guys all of the intimate details of my dad. There are certain things, like he laughs like Tigger, that's not in here. He loves Westerns, that's not in here. But I took down characteristics of the father. And if you don't have a good dad, you do have a good dad. And if you don't know him, you should meet him. Because self-worth comes from the Father. I'm trying not to get all choked up because another good dad just walked in. That's my mama's dad. He's a good dad too. I count myself so lucky that I had these amazing men to look to, whether it's my dad, my grandpa, or my other grandpa. But I count it even more lucky that I have an amazing Father in heaven to look to. So I'm encouraging you guys, first and foremost, as men, you're doing a good job. And you are needed and you are valued. And we thank you as women for doing what you do. But I also want to encourage you that if you don't have a good dad, you do. And you should meet him and you should talk to him because he's pretty cool. And if you need help with that, you got a good pastor to help you through that. So let's stand and pray. Lord,